Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to Deloitte webinar on a topic that is not just timely, but absolutely critical in our increasingly connected world, API security. My name is Nina Colley. I'm an Associate Director for Cyber Strategy and Transformation. I'm very happy to be your host for today's webinar. I'm sure all of you know that we are in the era of a rapid digital transformation where API security is now a major concern for more organizations globally. And also API power almost every online interaction. So this has created a necessity to understand and protect our API than never before. So this webinar, it has been structured into two parts. For the first part, we'll have an insightful presentation that will dive into some of the common vulnerability that we have seen and also the evolving API trade landscape. We'll also touch on best practice, which I'm saying that measures that organization can put in place to ensure that they are protected or they are protecting their digital assets against these API breaches. Our speaker for this first session is someone who has assisted many organizations across various industries in conducting a comprehensive API security assessment. So obviously he brings a very invaluable real experience to this webinar. So his name is Elvis Anani. So following that session, we'll have another part that that is going to be more an engaging panel discussion. Our experts also, they will share some of the experience that they have encountered in conducting API security. But before we begin, I just want to remind you some of the housekeeping rules. Please ensure that your microphone are muted to minimize background noise. And also feel free to submit your questions during this webinar and we'll do our best to answer most of the questions. So thank you once again for being here, and we look forward to a very informative session. So allow me to welcome our first presenter, Mr. Elvis. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. And today I'll be taking you on a journey. I'll be taking you on a journey on APIs, my experience with API testing, and all that I've seen in APIs, the latest or the recent trends of attacks in the next 15 minutes. So buckle up and let's start. APIs power everything we have from ranging from our phones to our computers. They power most of the digital innovations that we see today. So if you have checked your phone today, you have checked on your phone today the weather updates, or you have made a transaction this morning, or you have even checked a location on Google, then you have interacted with APIs. If you have ever used a mobile application to buy or to pay for something you bought, then you have interacted with APIs. Today, we are looking at the risk that's associated with these APIs and how threat actors exploit these risks in order to steal data that cause a whole lot of damage to institutions and individuals. We'll start off by noting what APIs are. We'll look at the benefits of APIs. We'll go on to look at the threat landscape. We'll talk about the cost of API breaches. Then I'm going to bring in recent API breaches and how it has affected people. I'm going to end my presentation by talking on measures that we can put in place to ensure that these breaches are reduced to the barest minimum. Let's start our journey. What are APIs? APIs are intermediaries that allow us to interact, or that allow softwares to interact between themselves. They allow us to pick resources and data from one platform and bring it to another platform. They help so that developers are able to build on functionalities rather than creating new softwares on their own. Like I mentioned, they power most of the systems we use. If you're a developer here, you might have created a web application, or you might have developed a software that has connections to Facebook or Twitter or any other social media that you use, so that people who visit your website can also post or share it on other social media platforms. This integration is only possible because we have APIs. If you wake up and you pick your phone to check the weather for the day, you are able to see the weather update on your phone only because there is an integration between the weather application and the back-end servers for Google and other weather stations. These are how APIs move and shape our everyday life. You perform money transactions only because there are APIs talking to payment gateways, and the payment gateways talking to back-end systems that are so complex that will take so much time to describe. These and many more are some of the reasons why we use APIs. Now let's go to the benefits of API. API, like I mentioned, help us to integrate two systems together. And this helps us so that we do not build functionalities from scratch. We can simply pick and add and build upon existing functionalities. So if you have an application that requires users to make payments, all you have to do is to bring in APIs for payment. We usually call them payment gateways. Bring in APIs, integrate them into your application, and now you are able, or your users are able, to now perform transactions within your application without you having to create a new payment gateway. They allow us to easily control or to implement security on these gateways. When we are making requests in between systems, the data that is being transmitted between the two systems, APIs allow us to implement security on them so that the data is protected from any hacker who might want to tamper with the data or try to steal the data. Usually, developers do this by using JWT tokens and OAuth authentication. APIs also allow us to easily move applications to the market, in the sense that we do not have to build everything from scratch. We simply have to pick and integrate existing APIs into our work that will help us to make what we are doing go on well. With this in mind, let's quickly look at the threat landscape for APIs. Globally, all organizations are facing challenges with APIs. In particular, Africa, Europe, and Middle East are facing the highest API security challenges. In Africa alone, 1 out of every 5 organizations faced an API attack in the year 2024. This is significant because it means that whenever we pick 5 companies, 1 of them suffered a breach in API. And who knows, the next target could be you. The next company could be you. So our webinar is trying to drive your attention to the fact that APIs are here to stay with us. They are improving our lives. They are improving our businesses. They are helping us integrate systems. However, they've become juicy targets for hackers. This year, a report released by SALT indicated that in the past 12 months, API attacks that organization faced were due to many of the API attacks the organization faced were due to vulnerabilities. The next causative agent for these API attack was the sensitive data exposure. What then are vulnerabilities? Vulnerabilities are weaknesses in softwares. So for a better explanation, I've tried to add vulnerabilities in this presentation, common vulnerabilities that we see in these softwares in this presentation. Usually from my experience, I see that because organizations don't have proper inventory management, they are not able to keep all the APIs, keep track of all the APIs that they have. They are not able to also properly look at how to fade out these versions of APIs that they use. You usually find misconfigurations in there and they're able to exploit them. We are also able, from my usual day-to-day security research, I'm also able to see broken level authorization. Thus, I'm able to move from one account of a user into another account as tokens being implemented in APIs are not properly done. I also find that there are no rate limiting to the APIs being used in applications. This allows a hacker with malicious intentions to steal data without any restriction. In one of my tests that I conducted, I found out that a hacker can exploit and exfiltrate data 20 at a time. And for a database that is having about 1 million records, this will just require an effort of just 5,000 requests, and then you'll be able to download the entire database. We therefore have to look at these attacks and how we can mitigate them. Next, I want to talk to you about some API breaches, and I will show you the underlying cause for these API breaches, including the vulnerabilities that led to these breaches. The first case I would like to talk about was an OTP that was leaked in the response. A giant telecom company that has an insurance application for registering and helping people to secure their mobile devices. So you have a mobile device, you want to have insurance for that mobile device in case it's stolen. The application that was used by this telecom giant had a problem with the OTP being sent. Rather than the OTP, whenever you register for this service, rather than the OTP being sent to your mobile device only, or the number registered to this mobile device only, the OTP code was leaked in the response that is being sent in your browser also. So malicious hackers were able to pick these OTPs and were able to create accounts and use them as and when they needed. It also allowed people to also access other people's accounts because the OTP, the hacker does not have to get the OTP from the original or the intended user. He can have it in his browser and just plug it in. The next attack that happened in 2025 involved hackers that are into web scamming attacks, those that try to steal credit card data. How were they able to validate these cards? Whenever a hacker picked a card, he is able to put in the card details into a legacy API, which was not properly managed by the provider or the payment gateway provider. This made hackers to be able to validate whether a card was right or had the right details or not, or if the card was valid or not. The next thing that happened was that they created fake login pages where they now integrated these vulnerable APIs in there so that whenever somebody tries to buy something on an e-commerce platform, these pages will capture the card details, send it to the legacy APIs, and then they would be checked for whether they are valid or not. By this, the hacker gets access to your credit card details. The next scenario I want to talk to you about was when hackers were able to steal 49 million customer data from a giant in the tech industry. This giant had a partner program, and so the threat actor or the hacker registered as a partner, and seven requests at a time, the hacker was able to steal 49 million customer data. Somebody will ask, how was this possible? This was only possible because the hacker created an automated script that would query the database for 7 requests at a time. And by so doing, within a few days, the hacker was able to exfiltrate so much data that destroy the image of this tech giant. This happened in the year 2024. The next attack I would like to talk about is when state actors compromised a third party and were able to exfiltrate data from the third party and also its clients. So the target of this hack was not just the third party, but it was also a governmental agency that had sensitive data on their systems. By compromising the third party, they were able to get access to the API token or keys needed to access the governmental organization's data. This allowed them to exfiltrate as much data that caused a major national security challenge. I would like to go on to talk about the estimated growth of attacks and the cost associated with these attacks. API attacks are not just declining, but they are actually rising. Reports have shown that API attacks will rise to as high as 996% in terms of attack volume, and then the value of API attacks will also rise from 4.7 million to 14.5 million in the year 2030. This means that it is becoming increasingly costly for companies that suffer API attacks. So suffering a breach today is really, really going to cost you so much. What then will be the way forward for companies? I'd like to mention a few, and then we can take our panel discussion. We have to make sure that we manage the APIs we have. By managing APIs, I want to say that we have to make sure that API are taken through a life cycle where we track them, where we safely retire them, where we securely build them, and how we maintain and test for its security. So if you are implementing APIs, you must consider all that I have on my screen. You must consider implementing a gateway, having developer portals, consider security, and consider policies that will guide these security measures. And you have to track and monitor them as they go through the different phases of API. This will help ensure that developers have a simplified experience. It will also help to facilitate their usage and it will help to streamline the governance and compliance process involved in these APIs. I'll end by saying that API threats are here with us, and therefore we have to seriously consider what we will do to make sure that we can bring down the curve of API attacks. Thank you and welcome once again. We'll be going into our panel discussion very soon. Our panelists are here with us. They have so much experience. But before we do, we'd like you to take these polls for us to help us in estimating how far your API maturity has gone. So on your screen right now, you have the API webinar polls. Help us to understand how far your organization has gone. Let's give ourselves a minute to go through this. I believe most of us have been able to make our selections. Those who have not been able to, we are still waiting on you to. There are 7 questions on how we can help measure the growth of API in your environment, how to measure the maturity of the APIs in your environment. So we are ending the poll shortly. If you have not taken the poll, please take it so that we can continue with the next session of the webinar. Okay, thank you so much for helping us take the polls. Thank you so much. Now we introduce the next section of our webinar. This involves a panel discussion where our team of experts are going to help us decode some of these trends and how we can bring down the curve. We have experts who have several years of experience in cybersecurity and offensive security, and who have so much knowledge in API and API security. First on our list is a leader in cybersecurity with over 10 years cybersecurity experience in API security testing. He holds certifications in the enviable and prestigious CPTS, that's the Certified Pen Tester Security. He also holds the CBBH, EJPT, Microsoft Azure Certificate in Cloud Security, and CC, that is Certified in Cybersecurity. His expertise spanned from red teaming to cloud security to penetration testing in mobile, API, and then web applications. He has helped organizations across various sectors to enhance the security and compliance of their systems, including the security of cloud and APIs. Help me welcome our first panelist, Emmanuel Owusu Ampong. Hello, Ima. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The next panel member is a cybersecurity and AI expert leader. He has certifications in CISSP, CISM, CEH, AWS, and Azure. He's a graduate from the University of Ibadan and has been recognized by Microsoft and Facebook for his innovations in AI and cybersecurity. He is currently the cybersecurity head and the community manager at Cloud Security Network. He's helping shape the future of African talents and helping to play a critical role in building and securing our digital world. He works with financial institutions and tech firms to build AIs and cybersecurity solutions that help in providing a resilient and compliant environment for all his clients. Help me welcome Emmanuel Okun. Hello, Emmanuel Okun. Hello, Ima. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, so let's go straight into our questions for our panelists. Let's also make sure that if you have any questions, you can drop it in the chat. We are going to ask our panelists so that they will help us to understand some of the questions that border on APIs and API security. I will start off with my question to Emmanuel Ampong. We have seen data protection laws like GDPR and others popping around the world. From your experience, how should companies start thinking about regulatory requirements when they are building APIs?
Thank you very much, moderator, for this. So I think for API and then regulatory requirement when it comes to APIs should be a very good conversation that we need to have. Now we need to bring this conversation in the early stage of development. Most times I see that when it comes to compliance styles, we bring these conversations at the end of development, which becomes an issue. And so I think that to start with, we need to start by privacy by design, which is a very good thing to do. So in early stages of development, we need to make sure that privacy by design is already in there. And also there should be data protection impact assessment done. Now, this will allow a company to pick out the key data fields. So, for example, PIIs, transactional information, those key data should be known in the first place. And then moving forward to the next phase, you can now design proper filtering, proper data masking to improve that. Now, I've seen too many of this out there where an organization is showing, or the response for an API request is showing virtually everything. So PRIs, which is from username or the full name to phone numbers to date of birth. And also, and in the case of a financial institution, we have transactional information or transactional data, account numbers, even when only account balance is what should be output or should be the output. So in this case, yeah, this violates the GDPR minimization policy or policy. And so to summarize this, how to incorporate compliance requirements in your API ecosystem is to bring that conversation about compliance in an early stage of your development, not at the end. Now, by doing this, it would allow you to integrate that and also meet most of the regulatory requirements. So in Ghana, for example, there's the data protection law. I think it's at 834 that speaks about how organizations in Ghana here should handle data when it comes to APIs. And so one of the concerns is excessive exposure of information or data through these APIs. And so to conclude, I'll say that we should have the conversation about APIs and compliance regulations early in the conversation or in the early stages of development, so that throughout the stages, this is in our minds and we integrate this into our systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Ima. I'd like you to take this question for me, Okun. Usually, we see that developers are under pressure to easily ship out their applications. How can teams balance the need for speed and also the need to embed security into every stage of the API cycle? How can the teams balance that with the need to also embed security whilst bringing it out as fast as possible?
All right, thank you so much for that question. So that's very, very important one, balancing security and I would say innovation. So first of all, it's a real honor to be here. This is a very timely conversation, especially for our continent Africa, where digital transformation is not just it's both an opportunity and also a necessity. And API security isn't just a checkbox; it's foundational to what we'll do. Um, so I would say that we are moving in a fast-paced world where yes, developers want to build new features every week and release features every day. And then they're also rushing to meet deadlines. And because of this, yes, we see how people might forget to embed security into this process. So organizations prefer to prioritize go live and then they'll just put security in the sidelines. I've actually heard some CIOs that would say, no, we just need to go live. We just need to launch, and after we launch, we then do security testing. But then rushing to market without integrating security early, this just builds up into what I'll call security debt. So the good news now is this: adding security doesn't really have to slow you down. So it's not really about putting roadblocks in front of the developers or in that way. It's actually about building smart systems from the start. So we have specifications like the Open API specifications that clearly define how API should work that can be leveraged. And what I would also recommend is threat modeling, which is even before writing any code, teams should do a threat modeling exercise or a review where that means they are thinking ahead about possible security risks and then how to prevent them. And then on a very important one, for fintech and banks, this has been I've seen this trend and it's really good in the sense that security check, API security checks are now directly embedded into the development pipeline. So if they would have any pipeline to push any code or API to production, they then embed in automated checks into this pipeline, which I would recommend. This all feeds into what I would call DevSecOps, right? So that means each time a developer pushes code, it automatically tested for security issues. So it's important. Security doesn't need to hinder innovation. There's definitely a balance where both can work together. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So it's all about striking a balance between the innovation and security. Okay, thank you so much. My next question to you, Ima, will be that APIs have become key revenue drivers for many companies. Many companies are able to now drive revenue from the APIs they produce. How do you make sure that security does not get in the way of monetization? Or how do you make sure that the security does not destroy the developer experience, the developer community that backs these APIs? How do you make sure that security does not destroy this experience?
Thank you very much. This is a very important conversation to have, a very good question, right? Now, in this day and age, there's a lot of fintechs, the other companies, they are trying to monetize APIs because they are the driving force for this digital economy. And so balancing that with security becomes a big issue for most companies. Now, most times, just like my co-member here mentioned, companies are pushing to go live early than to consider security. And so a fintech, a company that is trying to drive revenue for these from these APIs, and there's a blocker, which most companies think security is a blocker. And so when we need to go through the entire security phases, make sure that our product is secured, we are delaying going to market, and that would delay revenue, or that would not give us the revenue that we want. Now, how do we approach this? The key thing here is to understand that APIs, one is the key driver for innovation, but security and the monetization can coexist. We can actually blend the two. We can actually blend security and monetization of our APIs. Now, what can go wrong here? If we push our products very fast without going through all the checkboxes around security, and in an event that these APIs are being breached, now one that would defame the organization. There's also revenue implications in there, right? So I believe that it is where these two teams here, or these two things here, are married together. We make sure that security is started in the initial phase. We don't leave developers out. We bring in security teams that would assist these developers in building secured APIs. Now, when this is a culture, no, I think the key thing is it being a culture. If you have the culture of security within our API development lifecycle, now it becomes very seamless. So it doesn't become a blocker or a stress for the dev team, where they need to always go back to the security team, pick up issues, and there's this back and forth. But if we are using these APIs as a driver for revenue, right? We want to monetize these APIs, then there should be a very seamless process in adding security to this. And I believe that if this is part of your culture, that will not take too long. That will not be a delay for you going live or you putting your product out there. So the key thing is that in your CI/CD pipeline and in your general culture, there should be security in there. You should have security experts, security aware people who are in there, who from the beginning of the process incorporate this in there, and that would even make the process testing, bug detection very early. And once we detect these bugs, these errors or security risk early, and fix them, it doesn't become a burden at the end of the process. So I believe that these two can coexist. Monetization and security of APIs can coexist to boost your revenue. But security must be considered. It must be part of your culture. If it is not part of it, and as I mentioned, anything goes benign, or the worst case scenario, your primary target is to monetize your APIs, but in the long run, you are now having revenue implications because your API has been breached. Now, one example I'll give here is Stripe, right? I've seen Stripe; they are doing very good when it comes to monetizing APIs and considering security as part of the entire process. So I think this is a benchmark, or this is something that every organization out there who is trying to monetize APIs should focus on. That security shouldn't be a blocker, shouldn't be a burden, shouldn't be a stress for the dev team, but it should be part of your culture.
Thank you, Ma, for the elaborate explanation you've given. I'd like to turn to Okun. Okun, talking about security, Postman's recent polls showed that 27% of developers are not using Key Vault to store their API secrets. Why do you think in this day and age this is still happening, and how can we improve it? Hello. So, from the recent Postman survey, we are seeing that most developers are not using Key Vaults. Okun, kindly help us to understand why these are still happening and how we can improve this.
All right. So thank you so much for that question. I would say first that this is actually a very scary pattern, in the sense that um, I've been with a bank where a developer working on one of their major products, one of their fintech products. um, felt that it's nice, it's okay to have that code on his laptop first, and then also push that code to a public GitHub repository. And as you would have it, this code has like secrets embedded in them, very, very sensitive secret, like API keys and all that, that someone can pick up and use to call sensitive APIs. There are cases where we've seen where you would see someone go to GitHub, pick up API keys from there, and then take those API keys to then call maybe authenticated endpoint. But all you need to do is to supply a source account number, a destination account number, and you execute a transaction simply by going to GitHub, picking up a secret key, and then using it to call one endpoint. And then that's it. And we've had companies that have lost millions in dollars actually through things like this. So developers pushing secrets to GitHub or hard-coded credentials overall, I would say it's a problem. It's a problem of awareness for a start, in the sense of developers being aware of secure coding practices, right? So that's where secure code training comes into play, ensuring that your developers know the risk. Some people don't really know. Some people don't know that you can actually harvest such secrets from GitHub. I would also say it's a culture issue. Culture in the sense that um, some people just imagine that security is something they'll fix later, right? But then by the time I want to go live, I would have removed the secrets. I would have done that, and I will be fine. No need to worry. But really, at the end of the day, they go live and that secret is still there. So we need to really change that mindset. Secrets should never live in a source code or even on WhatsApp, even on email. No, you should not have secrets exposed in that way. And there are a lot of solutions, even on AWS, on Azure, other third-party providers that also provide this what we call secret management service that can be leveraged. And there are even open source alternatives that you can use. Bottom line is this: if your API secret is still sitting in plain text somewhere, you're not just behind, but you're exposed. Yeah.
Thank you. You are not just behind, but you're exposed. Ima, do you think it's important for institutions and companies to have dedicated API security policies separate from their broader security policy? If yes, why? If no, why not?
Thank you very much. So I think this is a very important conversation to have when it comes to policy, right? Policy shapes your IT infrastructure, your IT space, right? And so with the emerging threat of APIs, I believe that APIs should have their own policy, because traditional application policy might not cover certain things that you'll find within or some of the API threats. So example, broken access control, schema validation of schema injections, rate limiting. Some of these peculiar risk that is linked to APIs might not be in your traditional application security policy. And so organizations should have dedicated policies for APIs. Right, I've worked with a number of firms or companies where we believe that our traditional application policy suffices or is okay. And in events that most times there's emerging API risks or threat, and now they have to go back to their policy and check, do we have these threats in our policy? And now they have to do API or the policy review, which is a very lengthy process. So I believe that to make sure we have secure APIs, our environment when it comes to our APIs ecosystem is up to date and is competing, we should have dedicated policies for APIs.
Thank you. Thank you. So you believe it's imperative that we have dedicated policies for APIs. Before we move on to the next question, I would like to remind you all that you can also join our interaction by typing your questions, and the panelists will help to answer them. Thank you. Now, switching back to Okun. How should organizations align their API maturity with their overall digital transformation goals? How should organizations align the API maturity with the overall digital transformation goals?
Okay. So when people think about API maturity, um, I often see that some people think it simply just means having some API documentation or having some Swagger file or Postman document sitting somewhere. But then real maturity is actually deeper than that. And we can come by this by asking some simple questions. So first is that, do we actually know who is using our APIs and what are they doing with them? Um, in organizations, you'd see issues where maybe a fraud happens. Some API endpoint was called to make that happen, but no one knows what endpoint really was called. There's zero visibility in that sense. So that even brings me to a very important part, which is around shadow APIs. Um, so I always have a saying, you can't protect what you don't know exists. You have to discover first, then you can defend. So it's important to ask that question. Who is using our APIs and what are they using them for? So that's important. The next is, are we also setting our APIs only for functionality, or are we also thinking about security in the sense of maybe injection attacks or bypassing rate limiting controls? And then also, in addition to this, would be for us to think about how do we manage different, we talked about lifecycle management. How do we manage different versions of our APIs? There are cases where an organization has moved to some new core banking API endpoint, but then the older API endpoint still exists, still active, and it's still talking to production. And so we need to have a plan for how to retire older versions, not just leaving them hanging and then hoping that no one is going to notice. So in this API economy, maturity is not really optional. It's a survival strategy. Yes. So because the moment if API is actually core to your business, then there will definitely be a target. So let's ask ourselves, um, are we not just are our APIs working, but are they working safely, intentionally, and strategically? Yeah.
Thank you, Okon. I would like to ask a follow-up question. So you mentioned that sometimes we even forget that some endpoints may even exist,
Mm.
or because we are not keeping track of them, we may not be able to document all the existing APIs. Do you know of any tool or strategy that can help us to discover and manage these APIs that might have gone unnoticed, either from development through to production side?
All right, good. So I'll give an instance. I did work with one of the major banks in Africa, and then they had this specific problem in terms of discovery for their API endpoints. And then I know that with the IT team, the security team, they did I'll say a smart trick in the sense of they used traffic monitoring, which is like the technical mention. Um, I'll avoid mentioning tools, but use traffic monitoring, which what it really did was to quietly watch the internal network traffic to see where requests were going to, right? And at the end of the day, after filtering all these requests, they were able to identify APIs that nobody had documented, and it was really an eye opener. And what I also really push forward, especially to organizations and banks, especially, would be having an API gateway. So if you have an API gateway, it can then become practice to um, govern and apply security controls through that API gateway. So any API that will be built within your organization, your bank, will go beyond an API gateway. If you have an API gateway, if you have an API security solution, definitely I would also recommend that. And I know that um, Deloitte, for example, works with different partners in pushing through with either implementing an API tool or some API gateway, API security solution. So that's also really be helpful in ensuring that there is end-to-end governance around the API lifecycle management within the organization.
Okay. Iman, would you like to add up to what Okun just said?
Yes, yes. So let me add up to what Okun has already mentioned. I think he's mentioned a lot of things. What I want to say is that let's compare these two organizations, right? Which I've seen this practice a lot of times. So one organization having an inventory of their APIs in Excel sheet. So onboarding, decommission of APIs is been recorded with Excel sheet, and a different company to having example an Azure API manager or any gateway that actually records all traffic that passes through the gateway and is able to now get proper inventory of the APIs, right? Now, if you compare these two organizations, you realize that one is almost about to be hacked or to be breached. The other one too has a proper culture for managing their API. So I believe that we need to have a very strong controls when it comes to how we manage our APIs. He spoke about shadow API, which is something which is very, 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 very important. Now, if you don't have oversight of all your APIs, now it becomes a very, very, a very big issue because you can't protect what you can't see. And so when I have a number of APIs, legacy APIs, old APIs, new ones that I don't even have any oversight on, then it becomes an issue because these attackers are looking out for these legacy ones, these old APIs that you don't have oversight on, and that can be a way that they can compromise you. So I believe that having proper API inventory or management practice is very key in API security.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Before we just zoom into the question from the participants, let's look at what do you think the future holds for API security? What's the future for API security?
All right. Um, now, so the future of API security really now with definitely being an AI being that I done a lot of stuff with AI, I would speak in that vein. But primarily, I would say it's going to be smarter, faster, and also more human aware. And I'll break that down into three words. First is we're gonna see more autonomy, right? Regarding how um, with APIs now, we'll be able to spot trouble better and raise alarms. Now, there are now API security solutions that are not just depending on some fixed rules, some fixed controls, but they are now a bit more intelligent in terms of spotting strange behavior and then taking action without even any human interaction, which is going to be very important. And continuous in the sense that as my co-panelist mentioned, in terms of having security embedded into all the stages of the software development lifecycle. That's also something we'll see more of. In terms of security, won't just be a checkbox, as I said before launch, but it will now be baked into every stage of the API lifecycle. And then third part will be contextual. Contextual in the sense of would have more intelligence and context into who is calling the API from where, and then what the behavior around it. So we'd see a lot more of these metrics being tracked. And so a, imagine where we're able to now very clearly differentiate between who is a regular user and who is the bot, right? Pretending to be one, and then we can then respond accordingly. So I'd say um, whether we are building own banking APIs, whether we're building cross-border payment. So one thing is clear, API security is important, and we should not just build APIs that are open, but we should also build APIs that are protected. Um, Also, APIs, yes, should be accessible, but also importantly, they should be accountable.
Thank you. Ima, would you like to add to the future of APIs?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So when it comes to APIs, just like Okun mentioned, the API risk is getting more smarter with AI. That's a fact. And we've seen variant of these API threats or API attacks where your normal, manual policy or controls is not they are not able to pick them up, right? So I believe that AI is going to increase or make the API threats a bit more smarter. So what can we do? I believe that we should move to a more context-aware detection, right? So that the API security adapts, it adapts who is making a call, what are they accessing? There's proper authorization, authentication around this. Now, this would also with the use of AI, definitely. So it's more like you are using AI to fight AI. So this is what we can do because they are getting smarter. And so if you're also using traditional means of detecting these security risks, then that becomes a very big issue. And so AI is going to also improve how we detect and manage API risk. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let's take a few questions from the audience. From Gregory Deco, if I didn't get the name right, please forgive me. What is the best API authentication tool? From Gregory.
Okay. Let me respond to that. So the short answer is this: there's no single best API authentication tool. Um, that should be clear. It will always depend on your use case, on your technology stack, and then also your security requirements. Um, so in terms of standards and protocols, I would say, for example, we would usually recommend that API should have what 2.0 or should have like proper um, guessing web tokens like JWTs. So ensure like less authentication across different services, or you can be leveraging like managed identities on Azure or AWS IAM. We also have mutual TLS, which is also another way of also implementing strong authentication control. So um, all of this is going to be by use case. So if you have public APIs, for example, and then you need to protect them, definitely have solid authentication over 2.0. If you have internal APIs that needs to just communicate with each other, then maybe you can use JWTs. So in that way, think about it from what controls do you need to apply rather than what the best tool today.
Would you like to add? Okay. Would Because of the sake of our time, let's go on to the next question. Will the risk appetite of an organization help them when it comes to risk? Will the risk appetite of an organization help them?
So let me take this on the risk appetite of an organization, right? Now, if the overall appetite of an organization includes the API security, and so when we are measuring the appetite of an organization, then we should consider this as part of it, right? Now, every organization have their own, I'll say risk appetite, what they can accept and what they cannot accept, right? And so we need to incorporate this or have in mind that appetite is it company wise, is it a holistic appetite, or do we need to have a different focus on APIs? I think that's what I'll say about how a company's appetite would also, I'll say, influence API security. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There was a question we answered during our panel discussion, and somebody wants more clarification on this. The person wants to find out how about integrating the API policy into your traditional application policy. Will that work for you? Any of the panel members can take it. Can we integrate our API policy into the traditional application policies that we have?
So we did mention that yes, we can have a dedicated policy for it, but yes, totally it's fine. We can as well also decide to go the route of integrating it into like the broader application security policy. But when doing this, we would want to do it intentionally and with enough specificity, in the sense that um, for many organizations, a hybrid approach works best in the sense that they're able to have everything in just one place. But here's the important thing. For traditional security policies, they are usually reliant on looking at user access management, section handling, maybe web application vulnerabilities, cross-site scripting and all that, data protection and all that. Also perimeter security as well. But API has introduced a new set of risks, and this new risk may not always fit plainly into that model. For example, for APIs are now being built as microservices. So as microservices, one microservice is communicating to another microservice. So you also need to think about machine-to-machine authentication. How does that happen? You also need to think about rate limiting. How do you protect and protect your APIs? You also need to think about versioning, payload validation, and all that. So if you're not just going to add it as one small section of your traditional policy, then you would want to have a very more practical approach in terms of thinking through it across all the cases. Then yes, I would say we can definitely go that route to integrate it.
Thank you. The question keeps coming. But I would like us to look at our webinar polls. Before we began this panel discussion, we asked participants to help us to understand the maturity of their APIs. Out of 64 respondents, 25 said that their organization does not have documented API strategy and governance framework in place at all. This is a very critical finding, and you should look to implementing some of these things. Some said they have literally no idea whether the organization has or not. If you have APIs in your environment, then you must make sure that you have API strategy and governance framework in place to ensure that the APIs are managed, because they are now the target of many cyber criminals. They contain juicy information, and so they are now the prime target. The next one was, do you have any plans in place for API governance strategy? And most of them said no. Most of our respondents said no. We also asked that, does your organization have inventory of all the APIs? And it will surprise you that more than half said that they don't. So our panelists just spoke about having your APIs listed in a spreadsheet against having an Azure API management tool that will help keep track of all the APIs in your system. And you should look at contacting experts who will help you to implement these things in your environment. We also asked, how confident are you about your API inventory? And most people said that they are not that confident. So the range between 1 to 10 for the confidence level topped the chart, being that many people are not confident about their API inventory, that the API inventory is not sufficient, doesn't cover all their APIs. So like we mentioned upstairs, just in the previous question, just make sure that you call in experts. Deloitte Consulting is here for you. We can help you so that you implement these solutions to keep track of all your APIs. Okay. The next question was, has your organization performed any comprehensive end-to-end testing of your APIs? And how or where do you perform these end-to-end security testing? And many people said that it's not applicable to them, and some also said that no, they have not. So if you are part of the companies or organizations that have not had any end-to-end, so it's not just about testing the API itself, it's also about the infrastructure that supports the API, the documentation that comes with the API, the functionality testing, the usability testing. Would it stand the test of time in terms of security? This is what we are talking about. So if you have not had an end-to-end API security testing for your organization, once again, we are here to assist you as Deloitte. How many APIs does your organization develop, deliver, and integrate? And most people have between 1 to 500 APIs being developed. Wow, 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 wow. So some of these APIs may go unchecked or unnoticed. So if you are between this range and you have about 500 APIs being developed, then yes, you have to keep an inventory of it, and that will help. The last question was whether your organization plan to conduct API security training in the near future. And many said that, okay, many said yes. Some also responded by saying maybe. So if you are part of the maybe people, I am here to give you good news. From the 26th of August to the 29th of August, we are organizing API security testing for developers and security professionals. So whether you're a developer or you're a security professional, I want to be able to open your eyes to see what hackers look out for in your APIs, how you can test your own APIs in-house and all that. We'll be having a 4-day training for all these groups of people, developers and security personnel alike. Make sure you register for this training. Make sure you register for this training. It's happening on the 26th of August to the 29th of August. So a month from now, we'll be having the API security training where we'll be talking about end-to-end API security testing. Make sure you join. You don't have to necessarily be a hacker to join this. No, anybody who is interested in securing APIs, anybody who develops APIs, anybody with interest in API at all. You are the chief information officer, you are the chief risk officer, and your company has APIs in the environment, then you should look to attending this API security training. It's happening on 26th to 29th of August. The rate is 6,000 cedis for those who be attending in person. The rate is 6,000 for those who be attending in person, and 5,500 for those who will be joining us online. So no matter your location, you can join us, and then we will go through how you can comprehensively test your APIs. You can register as an organization, you can register as an individual. For those who will be coming in person, we'll provide meals for you. You provide you breakfast and lunch, and you don't have to worry about item 13. So it is 6,000 for those coming in person and 5,500 for those who would like to join us online. We'll be sending out a survey form where you indicate whether you're interested in the upcoming training or not very soon. So we'll be sending it to you. For the sake of our time, we'll also be responding to most of these questions that you asked in our training. So make sure you don't miss this training from 26th to 29th of August. Before I leave, let's wrap up with some of the suggestions from our panelists. Our panelists were able to show us that even though we need to have APIs being shipped out on a regular basis, they also said that we should balance the need for security with these shipments. Anytime we are shipping API from testing to development, we must make sure that we have thoroughly checked them. We must also keep track of all the APIs in our systems, and we can also think about monetizing. Our panelists were able to help us to understand that Stripe, a company that deals in APIs, have been able to create a balance between monetization and security. They're able to monetize the APIs they ship out, as well as provide security for it. We also mentioned that developers have to be aware of secure coding practices and ensure that the culture of security is built into the application even before we bring it out. So from the design stages, security must be considered. We also said that we cannot protect what doesn't exist. You have to discover to protect. We have to have a proper management of APIs. And lastly, we looked at the future of APIs, where we said that The threat of APIs are going to grow. However, we can also keep pace with it by ensuring that we have up-to-date knowledge about what we have in our systems, inventory of what we have, and also to automate using AIs to track some of these security challenges with APIs. Thank you for your time with us, and have a lovely time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we have a survey for this webinar on the screen. You can scan the QR code and provide us feedback on how you saw the webinar. Thank you so much. So before you leave, you can scan the QR code and then provide us a feedback on how the webinar went for you and suggestions for future improvements. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely day. Thank you so much.